Hello everyone, and welcome to this video from the RICS Tech Partner Program. My name is Andrew Knight. I've been with RICS for over 10 years, working in the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the business, looking at the whole implication of data and technology as it affects the built and natural environment. And I'm really pleased today to have Oculo, to have Wojtek and Tom from Oculo with us to discuss their particular solution and how that affects and helps manage the built environment, particularly around the construction cycle. So please do come online, Wojtek and Tom, and welcome to the program. Hello, good afternoon, both of you. The first question I'm always interested to ask actually is to give a bit of the history and the backstory of our partners. So I'm really keen to hear how Oculo came to be and a bit of a backstory on you and the rest of the team in terms of your skills and experience. So do give us a bit of history about Oculo and a bit of an idea of you and your colleagues' background and expertise.
For sure. First of all, thanks for having us, Andrew. Really excited to be discussing this. So why don't I start by introducing myself? So my name is Tom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Oculo. My background is in technology. So I've always been a technologist. I've been building tech solutions for a number of industries throughout my career. Some of the highlights would be building the 5th best-selling app in the UK Apple's App Store, as well as helping build collaboration software, Jira, at the Australian technology giant Atlassian. So witnessing firsthand how collaboration is done by some of the world's most technologically progressive companies. Wojtek?
Sure. Wojtek Szymczak, COO and co-founder of Oculo. My previous career was in consulting, where I've been working with a lot of companies, including the heavy industries companies, trying to help them solve the really challenging strategic problems they have. And over the years of being in this business, I realized that oftentimes it's not just the tech that's necessary for productivity improvements, it's also the people and the process. So I'm trying to bring in this mindset and this experience into Oculo, into our relationships with the construction industry.
Well, that's great to hear. So I guess if it was your kind of elevator pitch or trying to explain it as simply as possible, well, what is Oculo?
So I guess you can say Oculo is like your very personal Google.
So perhaps we can start by.
Okay, let's maybe take a step back.
Yeah.
Tom, you go first.
Well, so I was going to answer the origin story of how Oculo came to be, and then also I was going to move into.
Yeah, no, do that, Tom.
All right. Look, the start for Oculo came when I went to business school. That's actually where me and Wojtek met.
So I'm just
we got exposed to the industry is the second. What struck us was that it isn't the lack of interest. We met. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Tom. You were dropping out a little bit there. Could I get you to start your answer again? Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the spark for Oculo came when I went to business school. In fact, that's where we met with Wojtek. And we got exposed to the challenges facing the industry. So everybody has heard that construction is the second least digitized industry in the world. But what struck us was that this isn't because of lack of interest. We've met a lot of really forward-looking people in the industry who are really excited about the potentials that technology can bring, but who are forced to use pen and paper or scribble on PDFs or use basically inferior technology options because the options that are provided are just so bad. So this was like the original inspiration for us, this realization that there's this whole market out there that could be served with state-of-the-art modern technology that just needs to be adjusted to the realities and needs of the industry. So in particular, we saw people walking around on sites, either taking notes with paper or photos using their mobile phone, and then spending hours compiling this into meaningful output reports. And then it's really hard to search as evidence. Or alternatively, we're using digital tools, which would force them to spend a lot of time filling in forms while standing on site. It's just such a bad experience. It's a lot of manual effort, a lot of time wasted. It's impossible to search. And ultimately, the one picture that's really important and meaningful at the end of the project is the one that you didn't take. So our thinking was, why choose what to capture to begin with? Why not simply capture the entirety of site condition on site while users do their usual inspection without requiring any additional steps, any clicks, basically making it fully passive and comprehensive all at the same time. So that was the initial spark. It's turned out that making this happen is actually a non-trivial endeavor because it requires harnessing really state-of-the-art computer vision. We're talking the same technology that's used for self-driving vehicles. So we got excited about trying to make that happen, and then COVID-19 happened. Wojtek, I'll let you explain what happened then.
Yeah, so actually this was in a way a silver lining in the whole situation, because it made a lot of people aware how critical remote ways of working and remote tools to enable this way of work would be for construction. And whilst the kind of productivity and technology wave was slowly coming about in the years prior, COVID was actually really a trigger, and we found that a starter of many great conversations with people who later became our clients and advocates. Tom was talking about the workflow, so let's say less than ideal workflow on the site during the documentation. There's another fundamental element which we feel really hinders the productivity of people who have a lot of background and experience and work that they bring onto construction site that's often being wasted because of the process that they have to endure. So if you think about a skilled engineer who spent 5 or 10 years studying the very technical degree, how many hours a week does he spend on just traveling to the site to resolve 1 or 2 issues? What if the site is remote? The meeting has to be coordinated several days in advance. It's several days until the important people get to look at one thing, resolve it, and move it on. What if you could do it with the blink of an eye? What if we bring the same improvement that telephones and video calls did bring to us 10, 20 years ago to it with the addition of 3D visualization? We've spoken to some consultant engineers already who try to use Google Street View, but obviously it's limited to the capture of Google Street View. Obviously it's limited to the date. What if you could have your very own Google Street View regularly updated, covering every single square foot of the construction site? Now, wouldn't that be an improvement? Wouldn't having a virtual meeting on site where everyone can just dial in on Teams, share screen as we will be doing it here, and basically go through these issues within half an hour in the morning rather than taking the entire day to resolve it? This is the kind of vision we started with in Oculo. But it doesn't stop there. This is the kind of on-the-go snapshot element. Now, what if you can be capturing this data and have very easy, simple access to it throughout the entire project lifecycle? We've heard a lot about the GTI, the importance of documentation for fire safety, and so on. What if, building on what Tom said, you could not only capture everything in one go during one site visit, what if within seconds you could access any of your historical visual data of the building behind closed wall, closed spaces, underneath concrete structures within seconds? How does that impact the way you're working with your teams and coordinating experts who are located all across the country or internationally? How does this simplify the kind of subcontractor conversations which, due to lack of data, often lead to sort of blind spots, ambiguity, disputes and claims, and unnecessary resource spend? This seems to be a big problem and a really exciting opportunity for us to try to address.
So you mentioned you're using that kind of visual capture quality that people would normally associate with driverless cars. Is that also being coupled with AI, machine learning, to interpret the images or assemble the kind of packages that people can then use?
So at the moment, indeed, these technologies are used. Our current focus is on perfecting the capture. It's making this really truly passive, without requiring users to do anything else. That's what's actually really difficult. So that's how we're applying these technologies at the moment.
And if somebody's going to use this, what kind of resources, skills, what tech do they need to actually start using Oculo on a site?
So this is the view. Go on, Wojtek.
It's super simple. All they need is a hard hat with a little mount and a 360 camera that you can put on top. You press play and you get on your job walk. The camera and our tech does the rest. All you need to do is transfer the data over to Oculo, and our AI and our cloud-based system would process it all and notify you when it's ready for virtual inspection. That's all you really need to do. The user interface, we regularly hear that from our users, is pretty simple, and that, like Tom said, that's one of the key things we're trying to optimize for. Make the technology work for people rather than force people to change and adapt to technology.
And give me some examples of the kind of people you're working with, the kind of journey they've had in terms of their adoption of it, their kind of usage of it. Where's it actually being used?
Of course, I'll give you a couple of examples, which indeed are varied and I think reflect how versatile Oculo can be. We've been working on infrastructure project within London together with TfL and its subcontractors in the midst of the first lockdown, allowing them to monitor progress and manage the project completely remotely for several months. We've been working with Skanska on some of their largest commercial projects, allowing them to keep track of everything that's going on and manage the relationship with subcontractors, as well as documenting everything for compliance purposes. We've been working with Wilmot Dixon, helping them produce sufficient and comprehensive documentation for the sake of fire safety and the golden thread and the fire safety bill that's coming up. And these are just some examples. We've had interest both from within the UK and internationally. We have presence in mainland Europe as well. And we feel like there's a lot more potential beyond just the kind of classical commercial housing construction or infrastructure. If you think asset management, building factories, manufacturing, there are a lot of places where remote visibility and documentation would be helpful. So we feel like we're just starting.
And does Oculo allow you to kind of almost present the visual image with plans, with BIM models? What's the kind of integration with other kind of views of the construction? Because clearly it's very important both through that construction process to ensure that the right thing is built, but also I'm just, as you say, talking about operational. What's that kind of linkage? What are you working on in those areas of linking, either plans or BIM models to the visual reality? Because as we all know, there's quite often that disconnect between what was planned and what was built.
Absolutely. Do you want to...
So I think that, yes, it might be helpful to actually show what Oculo does. Just one moment. I hope you can see my screen now. There should be a drawing on it with dots. So this is a familiar starting point for a lot of people. The 2D drawing, which we stare at, trying to imagine what is the actual 3D reality behind it. Trying to think, okay, so those 2D walls, how does it correspond to the height on the wall, to where the fire stoppings would be, where the sort of cable trays and the electrical ductworks would cross. Why do we need to do that? We've got technology to visualize it perfectly. So this is an example output of Oculo where the dots correspond to every single scene that was extracted from the camera, from the WOC. And this allows us within one click to literally teleport ourselves there and see what reality on a given date actually looks like. Let's do just that. So here we are, one of the corridors in a basement of that big building. Very much like in Google Street View, you can look around. It's a 360 picture, see installations above your head, see whether the floor and the passages are clear underneath. Look behind you, because as we often know, a picture that comes from reporting construction site is just a 2D excerpt from everything around you. What if you can see the entire context? Secondly, it's not just this spot. You can literally walk through it remotely, as we're doing now, and we can continue our inspection, discussing what's going on, what are the outstanding subcontractor tasks, and so forth in this area, or in fact, any other. I don't need to walk from here to a floor that's 30 levels above. I could just swap it and move the floors through here and basically jump around in no time. So even the site logistics becomes very simplified when it comes to inspections. Secondly, I can observe a lot of issues that perhaps would pass by my attention because I don't have time to walk around the site. Here we can see there is a missing safety barrier. Perhaps that's an issue I want to track and photograph. I can do this very easily with Oculo. All it takes is clicking here and creating an issue. I can mark it as an observation, This would land in the system. I'll be able to describe it, assign a person to it, and fire them an email right away. Very much accelerating the workflow on addressing the issues that are found on site. I can do this from the comfort of my desktop, sitting in the office without even needing to go there, because this capture could be done by my site assistant who is on the site that day, or an inspector. So it very much promotes collaboration and transparent approach to working together. Even more so, I'll show you another element. I can see how this place looked like a day before, a week before, or 3 months ago, just simply by clicking the kind of comparison mode and selecting the date that would interest me. So I have a side-by-side view of the very same location, and here I can pick a date that's 2.5 months ago. So we can see how the environment has changed, and likewise, we can rotate around it and see what the changes have been. On top of that, and that might take a moment to load up technically, I can also compare it in the same way against the BIM model. So what people often find difficult is collaborating with all the data that a BIM model would contain without necessarily knowing how to access the complicated technology. Not everyone is a Revit wizard or a Navisworks master.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of people who would benefit from the ability to just display what's going on, have a snapshot-based look, peek into the model to compare it to the reality to see whether the pipe and the ductworks have been installed the right way, and whether we need to make any amendments either to the site or to the model to reflect the as-built conditions. Now, Oculo allows you to do exactly that within a few clicks, within 1 second. So we've practically had very good feedback from specialist subcontractors, especially M&E, who said this saves us so much time in terms of running around the site looking at things. Instead, we can just log into Teams, pull up Oculo on the screen, pull up this comparison view, and basically trace the relevant installations in terms of how they're meant to be versus what is possible on the site, and therefore streamline and accelerate any roadblocks that could be coming up as a result of that.
And presumably this can be a standard Revit file, IFC file in terms of taking the geometry and the BIM model in.
Correct. We support all the standard formats.
Yeah. So clearly this can be used at so many points through the life cycle, as you say. It's not just necessarily construction, but through that asset management phase, and I guess demolition, any kind of significant renewal, operation, maintenance, this would be appropriate, condition reports. So really, presumably you see potential here right across the full life cycle of building operations and construction.
Certainly, and very much so. We're actually working together with the Golden Thread Initiative, trying to discuss and define how this kind of data capture 360 photography would be relevant and helpful to support the golden thread of key information, especially with regard to fire safety, but not only, as a very easy way to hand over additional layer of information. Obviously, that doesn't take away the need for a proper CDE or a structured set of documents, but we do think that not only an addition of the 3D dimension, but also ways of integrating this with the richer data set, such as asset register or other elements, would be true added value, especially to people who then have to operate the building for decades to come.
And is that on your roadmap, that kind of sense of almost that augmented reality of being able to perhaps overlay, as you say, once it's a built asset, overlay those kind of assets? So you might look at an HVAC and it would immediately give you some more, added information about the HVAC or the fire sensor or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So already with what we offer today, you can already create those observations and start documenting some of those elements. But we're definitely exploring options of making it even more deeply integrated. So that's very much something that we're looking at, as well as many other applications of this technology.
So what have been the biggest challenges in building this and helping clients understand the value of it?
So I would say maybe from my side, on the technology side, making this truly passive and automatic, requiring zero extra input from the user, that's a really complex technological problem to solve. The second thing I would say is, we're both we started as industry outsiders. So on one hand, getting to understand the exact workflows of our users, making sure that what we do fits in perfectly and it solves a real problem. That's been, it's been a bit of a challenge initially. But I gotta say, once this works, it's really rewarding to see it. So we recently spoke to a PM on a fairly large site who told us how before Oculo, he was working with 20 people every Monday to identify all the issues. And, with 20 people, because there's different representatives of different trades and specialists. And then he would scribble things on a PDF and then spend an evening copying that into an Excel file. And hearing him how he can just send an assistant to do the scan, all the tasks are distributed, they're all in the same place, and they're all resolved in a central place. And ultimately, hearing them, he has 3 evenings to spend with children rather than doing this manual work. That's that's rewarding, and that's what makes us happy in the morning.
And I suppose you hopefully have a very collaborative.
Add anything on the challenges?
No, I think that's very much the main thing that I would say that was a challenge at the very start, to fully understand the problems perceived from the customer perspective. They do look differently when you come at it from the technical perspective.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it turns out that, as I've mentioned in the beginning, it's not just the technology element that sort of sticks out, it's the process around it and perhaps the people involved. So going into conversations with this more open mind to make sure that we understand not just this sliver of a problem in that particular case, but the context around it, to then design the right solution in terms of tech, but also in terms of the process in which this will be used, was probably the hardest step to overcome. But I would say all the people we've been working with have been very accommodating and very helpful in providing us with this guidance and sharing both the frustrations of the current status quo, as well as their bits of vision in terms of how would a better process look like. So it's very much a collaboration, and that's something that is truly rewarding for us.
Yes, I was almost going to highlight that it feels like your process has had to be very collaborative, because almost your customers are helping you to understand the use cases and to understand how to kind of co-create, I guess, your roadmap of future enhancements, because actually you're being humble enough to realize that you can bring the tech, but you need their domain expertise to say, well, actually, this is our problem. Can you make Oculo do this or do that better? Because actually that's the real business problem we have. So don't get too focused on the tech. Tell us how we can make the tech work for the process, work with the people, because construction, once again, is still a people business. It's not a site full of robots, is it? It's full of people with, and as you said, Tom, people who would like to have perhaps a bit more free time with their family and their kids as well, and not spend their days driving around. I mean, aside from that, from that kind of collaborative piece, were there any particular challenges technically? I mean, having been around construction sites, quite a lot of areas have low light and issues like that. Presumably there were some challenges around just that video capture when you walk around a corner and you're in a dark basement that hasn't been lit yet. So have you had to kind of deal with those kind of challenges almost of the environment of a construction site?
That's a good point and a good question. So yes, indeed, so we were aware of those challenges, getting into it. That's why our technology fundamentally does not require any additional signals. It doesn't it works without GPS. It works without Wi-Fi. It works in core light conditions. We do have, specifically for those darker environments, that's obviously a recurring problem. We do have 2 ways of addressing it. One is we do have a companion mobile app, which, since we know where you are in 3D space as you walk around all the time, it really is simply snap a picture and carry on walking with your mobile phone. That can have flash enabled. I think Wojtek is showing right now what the output looks like. And again, this is it's not snap a picture, fill in the form, spend a minute filling it in. It's immediate. That's one solution to this. The other one is we do provide, for particularly dark areas or dark sites, we do also provide additional lighting that you can put on the hard hat, and that makes your immediate surroundings more visible. So this is very much a problem that can be and is overcome.
Yeah, no, understood. And have you had to make the hardware itself more robust than a normal setting, because clearly people are going to walk around and bump into things, and I guess that's had to be a kind of an issue as well in terms of surrounding it with that degree of robustness that once again a construction site out in the open air, suddenly you're on the roof and it's pouring with rain, I guess, and I presume that the odd person's bumped into the ceiling with it as well.
Yeah, our most extreme case, I think somebody bumped like 20 times into the camera and it fell once as well. We're still able to recover from situations like these. That's the most extreme we've seen. But more broadly, we've done extensive research on the types of hardware available in the market, and we chose them specifically with this in mind. So the dust-proof, the waterproof, rugged to be used in this environment.
Well, it's obviously an incredibly interesting and powerful piece, and you've intimated the kind of use cases that you've been working on. What's the vision for Oculo, and what do you think this will affect the way that construction sites are managed? I mean, you've talked about obviously augmented reality. So what's the vision? What's your roadmap, and what do you think, given your experience now with the sector, of the opportunities for this kind of technology?
So I would say, look, what we've brought so far is automated passive capture, and that's just the starting point. As in, it's a foundation on which we can build a whole lot more. So we're focusing on streamlining existing workflows, making sure we play nicely and seamlessly with tools that our users use already. So, for example, if you use a collaboration software like BIM 360 or FieldView, we actually already integrate with these and are going deeper in that direction, where you simply can, highlight an area in our environment and then carry on using your standard workflow. Wojtek also mentioned the GTI, the initiative run by Ministry of Housing, focusing on the fire safety, the new fire safety regulations. We think there's a role we can play in there around asset management, again, around making both compliance with the new regulation possible, but also making it easy, making it really simple way of capturing this data. So again, this is about simplest, quickest way to achieve the desired outcome, making tools that work for our users. And yeah, I mean, this is just the beginning. There's many other products that can be built on top of this platform that we've built, and we're excited about the possibilities of being able to further serve the industry.
I mean, one thing that sorry, Wojtek, go ahead.
I would just add to this one comment, is that more and more we see and hear that information exchange and transparency are very much becoming the heart of successful project management, in the same way, if not more, than managing of the supplies to the site or of the labor movement. And with this in mind, we think that over the next 5-10 years, something like a digital control room for every project will become more and more compulsory, really. And we feel like, whilst there are very big companies building very complex, powerful technologies, what might be really important is a way of making this accessible and available to everyone on whom the good collaboration will rest, not just the dedicated experts, such as currently the BIM teams are, or the very specialist subcontractors. And this is where we believe Oculo will have a particular place, to simplifying and enabling connection to those more powerful elements, whilst providing an additional layer of data, such as the kind of 3D reality capture.
And one thing I'm always conscious on when I talk to our partners is the accessibility of technology, not just for the bigger firms, but those tiers of smaller, medium-sized enterprises. And as you know, I'm sure you've learnt with construction, there are many tiers, there are many levels of contractors, subcontractors, tier one, the project sponsors. How are you finding the sort of accessibility of Oculo to those different layers? Because there's clearly so many different people on site in terms of the various suppliers, and there's often a danger in construction that it turns into a sort of confrontation between the various levels, and that collaboration is a very important part of getting to sites to make them work smoothly, and also enabling different levels of company have access to technology. I'm hoping that what you're going to say is that Oculo is one of those products that smaller firms can access, and is from a kind of a technology and from a a cost-benefit perspective, accessible for smaller contractors, for example.
Yes, very much so. And like we've mentioned, we're working closely with all those who are interested in adopting our technology to find a solution, a sort of package that makes sense in terms of the value as well as the cost benefit analysis. In terms of the collaboration piece, something that we've seen happening on even the bigger projects that we're on, and that was very much our ambition and part of the vision, was that this data is in fact shared across the different groups. The objections you've raised, this will just be used as an ammo against the other party. That's a common concern that we hear, but in fact, contrary to that, we've seen contractor actually adding users and sharing capture with their subcontractors. It really simplifies and streamlines their weekly meetings, simplifies the discussion, it simplifies issue resolution. So it very much reorients the teams towards playing towards the same goal rather than being at a constant loggers at one another.
No, I mean that's a very interesting and powerful point, I think, because anything that can help that whole construction sector work more collaboratively, keep sites working, keep disputes to a minimum, have that kind of clarity and dare I say, trusted source of information, so that there's no ambiguity about the status of a site, what needs to be done, and also arguably things can be remedied more quickly. And as you know, if a mistake is made in construction, the sooner that is caught and remedied, the better, in terms of discovering it either as part of the construction phase or, dare I say, even at the asset management phase, when you discover that you now have a building that hasn't been built to the correct standards, or from an operational point of view, to actually make it work. So, well, this has been fascinating, and I look forward to talking to you both again about how Oculo is progressing and the kind of things that you're doing, you're using with customers. This has been fascinating, and I look forward to our next discussion. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Wojtek.